In 2022 and 2023, the United Arab Emirates pledged whopping $97 billion in new African investments across renewable energy, ports, mining, real estate, communications, agriculture, and manufacturing. This was 3 times more than China, according to FDI Markets, an FT-owned company tracking cross-border greenfield projects. Why does Africa, a continent blessed with abundant natural resources, still grapple with corruption, poverty, and bribery? These issues have eaten away at the potential of African nations for decades.
The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of political office and political space is one of servant leadership, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that the occupation of public space and public office is an honor and a privilege, that is the day Africa begins to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that the occupation of office is not one for the privatization of public wealth, that is the day Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician recognizes that they do not have the monopoly of wisdom, that is the day that Africa will begin to move in the right direction. The day the African politician realizes that longevity in office is not the solution to African problem, that is the day Africa begins to realize their potential. The day that the African politician begins to remember that the electoral vote is a child for them to deliver on health, on agriculture and education, that is the day Africa will begin to know her place in the world. The day the African politician is liberated from the chains of greed, that is the day that Africa will realize her potential.
For decades, the paradox is stark when compared to the journey of the United Arab Emirates, UAE, which has transformed from a struggling collection of desert sheikdoms into a global powerhouse. This transformation was fueled by the same resource that many African countries possess in abundance: oil. Do you know, before the discovery of oil in the late 1950s, the UAE was a collection of small, underdeveloped principalities. The economy relied heavily on fishing, pearling, and remittances from abroad to survive. The infrastructure was minimal, with few roads and limited healthcare facilities. The population lived in harsh desert conditions, with little hope for significant economic advancement. But here is the kick. The discovery of oil changed everything. Strategic investment in oil wealth, disciplined leadership, and a vision for diversification saw the United Arab Emirates develop world-class infrastructure, become a hub for global trade and tourism, and rapidly ascend to economic prominence. But wait. In contrast, African countries like Nigeria, Angola, and Libya, which also discovered oil around the same time, have not mirrored the UAE's success. Nigeria, for example, became a major oil producer in the 1950s. Yet the wealth generated from oil led to widespread corruption and economic mismanagement. Even former Nigerian President Yakubu Gowon once said,
"The rest of that 70s era, 72-73, Yom Kippur happened. Crude oil prices rose from $3 per barrel to $12 per barrel. There was a boom in Nigeria economy. We had just come out of a war. Nigeria had money." That same Yakubu Gowon was attributed to have said, "The problem is not money, but how to spend it." A lot of people are disputing that today, that do we still have that money? There was a Ghanaians out, not knowing that our ineptitude, massive corruption had killed us in this country. We tried to wriggle our way back, then we went to steal. 83, 84, we set up DSC, Delta Steel Company. We looked at Ajakuta and some other steel company, but today no one is working. That same 70 was the sweet spot Nigeria missed to become an industrial nation. Most of the wealth we made from that same 70s could have been plowed to the industrialization of the nation. But what did we do? We wasted and we frittered our resources away. Corruption was on the high, and we never looked back. Once we returned to democracy, there was massive corruption in this country. I just pray we get a chance again at victory. And what we will do with this chance will matter greatly. Because Nigeria is a country that knows how to waste its opportunities. That's why where we are today, we wasted that swinging 70s. There was so much money. Let's not forget, in that same decade, that's when we set up the NNPC. Because there was money, but what did we do to it? Per income capital in Nigeria was $1,000, rose from about $600 to about $1,000. Unemployment rate was less than 10% in that same 70s. The problem was not money, but how to spend it. But how did we spend the money? Wastefully and stupidly.
Well said, Rafah.
Money is not our problem, but how to spend it, highlighting the nation's struggle with governance and effective utilization of its resources. Do you know today the UAE, that had nothing before, its investments in Africa are vast and expanding. In 2022 and 2023, the UAE pledged whopping $97 billion across various sectors, including renewable energy, ports, mining, real estate, the mineshawl, communications, agriculture, and manufacturing. This investment is 3 times more than China's commitments during the same period. UAE companies like DP World and Abu Dhabi Ports are significantly expanding their operations in African countries, from Senegal and Egypt to Angola and Mozambique. Do we say that's a country where things work? But here, African leaders continue to exhibit corruption and inefficiency, often seen hopping from one international summit to another. President Emerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe is a prime example. After attending the Korea-Africa Summit, he immediately flew straight to Russia to seek support from President Vladimir Putin. Mnangagwa complained to Putin about Western countries favoring its fellow African countries.
The relations just ended there. And thereafter, both the British and the Americans have not looked upon us. They think that we are too much inclined to the East. But we have no apologies at all. We feel we are better in relations with the people who also respect us, not the persons who look down upon us. So we are very happy to be here. And we are anxious to actually have our relations more comprehensive and consolidated between ourselves. Yes, we are a very advanced country, but there's a lot that we can learn from you. There's a lot that we can benefit from that relationship. And there's a lot that we can open for the Russian Federation to participate in our economy, especially in the mining sector and in agriculture. There's a lot that we can afford for you to participate. And in that process, the West will run away. You see, the West have just begun consolidating their power in Zambia, our next neighbor. You know, there was a time when Zambia and Zimbabwe won. It was called Northern and Southern Rhodesia. It was won by the British, but they were now separate. And the Americans are consolidating their power in that country, both in terms of security and in terms of financial support to Zambia, to make sure that we feel lonely. But that will not change us, because we have taken a course which, as a people, that we feel we want to be independent and we choose our friends ourselves. And besides, we are independent today because most of us in the leadership trained here during our war of liberation. We got our independence because we were supported by yourselves here, and you don't forget that history, and you've stood by us. So, Mr. President, I am happy to be here, and if opportunity avails later on, I mean, we may find time to chat and go into more detail as which areas we must focus in terms of supporting each other, and in terms of where we feel we need external support, more especially in the area of defense and security, as well as food security. In those areas we need to be supported, the mechanization of our agriculture and so on. You can't go to the West. We have to come here because the West would want to see us down. They support our neighbors, Zambia and Malawi, very heavily. But in spite of that, Zimbabwe's economic growth is the fastest growing economy in the region, in spite of us being isolated by the Americans.
And Malawi over Zimbabwe, and asked Russia to help exploit Zimbabwe's agricultural and mining opportunities. This plea portrays African leaders as perpetual beggars rather than capable leaders who can harness their own resources. Here is what battles Why aren't African leaders or find it difficult focusing on domestic development and tackling corruption instead of attending endless meetings abroad? Talking about endless summits abroad, specifically in my previous video. Have you heard about the current summit going on in Switzerland? A summit focused on peace in Ukraine is taking place in Bergenstock, Switzerland from June 15th to 16th, 2024. Interestingly, some African leaders who are well connected with Western countries have been invited. President Ruto of Kenya and President Nana of Ghana are among the attendees and other African leaders. The irony. This summit on Ukrainian peace features President Zelensky of Ukraine, but excludes the Russian president.
A summit on peace in Ukraine kicks off today in Switzerland, bringing together more than 90 countries. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in the town of Bergenstock on Friday evening. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, French President Emmanuel Macron, and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will also attend. The summit aims to create unity around a peace plan put forward by Ukraine. But Russia is not invited, and its main backer, China, is not coming either.
Well, while it's commendable for African leaders to engage in global peace efforts, isn't it crucial for them to address conflicts closer to home first? Sudan has been engulfed in war since May 2023, with no resolution in sight. The Congo continues to be plagued by over 100 rebel factions, yet no significant peace summits have been convened by African leaders to address these crises. As the conflict in Europe intensifies, our hope is that African leaders will not become so entangled that they end up sacrificing their own people for a distant war while ignoring the turmoil at home. Why do you think African leaders are more invested in foreign conflicts than in resolving their domestic issues? Shouldn't they be empowering their citizens and fostering self-reliance? These summits often distract from crucial issues at home. For instance, while Mnangagwa was in Russia, he overlooked the potential of Zimbabwe's fertile land and vast mineral resources. Zimbabwe could feed East Africa if it invested in mechanized farming, yet its leaders prefer to seek external aid. Consider the irony: Mnangagwa running to Russia, a country currently forcing African migrants to fight in their war against Ukraine or face deportation, according to Bloomberg.
So sending migrants and students in battle under duress seems like an incredible, topic. Is there a precedent for this?
It does seem like something you would hear like hundreds of years ago, maybe. This tactic started with the Wagner mercenary group. You'll recall during the battle for Bakhmut that they started to enroll prisoners, and amongst those prisoners there were also migrants and foreigners. What is happening now, as Russia's losses mount, is that they're expanding that tactic. So they've expanded to at least 21 countries. Some of these individuals will be joining the military for monetary reasons, or they're being paid to join the military. Other tactics that they use, they look in databases for people who in the past applied for work in Russia. They're being lured to Russia with the promise of a job and then being forced to join the military. And thirdly, which is what our story focused on, young students and workers who are already in Russia and have visas, Moscow is threatening them with deportation. And obviously, once they are in Russia, it's very hard to resist those threats.
Reported that there are over 37,000 African students in Russia, many of whom face coercion to join the war. We are on the wait to hear from any African immigrants living in Russia. If you are, drop your comment. Meanwhile, Africa's development lies in the hands of its own people, and it is through self-reliance and strategic internal investments that the continent will rise. Evidence has shown through this Nigerian industrialist Benedict Peters' Bravura Holdings plans to start a world-class lithium upgrade facility by 2025, aiming to process over 5 million tons of ore annually. This initiative highlights the potential for self-reliant development. Africa is rich in lithium, with significant reserves in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Ghana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and Mali. The question is, why are African leaders not capitalizing on these resources to drive economic growth? In recent developments, Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Ibrahim Traoré, is showing remarkable progress. Traoré has been making strides in stabilizing the country and pushing forward economic reforms.
Being here in the country of the upright man is a dream come true. To President Traoré, the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara, President Traoré, who has led the struggle to complete the unfinished business that was started by our ancestors and our Pan-African leaders in 1963 when they created the Organization of African Unity.
Burkina Faso is investing in new petrochemical projects and is positioning itself as a future powerhouse in Africa. Could Burkina Faso become the best country in Africa in the coming years? Traoré's administration has focused on improving infrastructure, boosting the agricultural sector, and enhancing security, which could set a precedent for other African nations. Another angle of internal is the rising price of uranium, up 233% in recent years, presents another opportunity for Africa. With significant uranium deposits in Namibia, Niger, and South Africa, the continent could reclaim its position as a top producer. The global demand for nuclear power is increasing, with many countries constructing new plants and reopening old ones to meet climate goals and energy needs. Africa's simpler regulatory processes and shallow deposits make it an attractive region for rapid development. But hey, it's said, African leaders still continue to seek foreign aid when the continent is sitting on such immense wealth. Does this mean there cannot be a unified effort to develop these resources internally and improve the lives of African citizens? What will it take for African leaders to prioritize their citizens and resources over foreign aid and summits? How can Africa break free from this cycle and achieve sustainable development? These questions demand urgent answers and bold actions from African leaders and citizens alike. In the backdrop of these questions, consider the rapid development of Burkina Faso's new petrochemical projects and Nigeria's Dangote refinery, which is set to transform the country's oil sector. These initiatives show that, with the right leadership and vision, African nations can leverage their resources for monumental growth and development. Burkina Faso, despite its political challenges, is pushing forward with projects that could change its economic landscape. Similarly, Senegal is investing in petrochemical industries that promise to boost its economy. Yet the narrative of dependency persists. The approach that not only portrays African leaders as beggars, but also shows a lack of confidence in their ability to lead and develop their nations independently. Meanwhile, the economic potential within Africa is immense. Nigeria, for instance, is advancing with the Dangote refinery, set to be one of the largest in the world, which will not only supply Nigeria, but could potentially meet a significant portion of Africa's energy needs. This project shows that Africa has the capability to build and sustain its industries without relying heavily on external support. The reality is, only Africans can develop Africa. The continent has the resources, the talent, and the potential. Do we say what it needs is visionary leadership that prioritizes internal development over external aid, leaders that focus on harnessing its resources, empowering their citizens, and building sustainable industries that can drive economic growth. But the doubt is high in recent news, where the wife of Zambia's President Edgar Lungu was implicated in a corruption scandal involving millions of dollars in misappropriated funds. This is not an isolated incident. Corruption remains a pervasive issue across the continent. The Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index consistently ranks many African countries poorly, highlighting the systemic nature of corruption. Wait, you remember South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma, who was embroiled in a massive corruption scandal involving the Gupta family, which cost the country billions of dollars. This is just to mention few. As we conclude this exploration into the stark contrasts between African nations and the United Arab Emirates, do you believe Africa can rise to its true potential? What steps do you think are necessary for real change?
If you are
to
still
occur?
not following us,
Subscribe,
you are probably
like, and
never
share
going
your
to see
thoughts
us
in
again.
the comments below.
But if you are, congrats. You are on a journey of discovery as we unlock the mysteries of the past.